وبعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الإمام إبراهيم الباجوري رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا الله تعالى به في رسالته يجب على كل مكلف أن يعرف ما يجب في حقه تعالى وما يستحيل وما يجوز. This epistle written by Imam Ibrahim al-Bajuri rahimahullah ta'ala, the grand Shaykh of the likes of Imam Yusuf bin Ismail al-Nabahani rahimahullah ta'ala, and one of the great scholars of Asrar University in Egypt, in Cairo. He wrote this epistle on the same model of Imam Yusuf bin Ismail and of Imam Muhammad bin Yusuf al-Sanusi rahimahullah ta'ala, 8th century scholar of Al-Maghrib, Western Africa. And he mentions at the beginning, it is necessary upon every mukallaf. The question is, what is mukallaf? Mukallaf is every legally obligated person. Anyone who has reached the age of maturity, has the rational faculty working, is defined as mukallaf, someone who is obligated by the divine law to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to follow out the commands, the ordinances of the divine law, Sharia. So he states, it is obligatory upon every mukallaf. A child who has reached the age of puberty, the age of maturity, is mukallaf. As long as he is sane, able-bodied. And if the child does not know whether he has reached the age of puberty, once he reaches the age of 15 years old, the author mentions that يَجِبُ عَلَى كُلِّ مُكَلَّفٍ, legally obligated individual, to know the following. أَنْ يَعْرِفَ مَا يَجِبُ فِي حَقِّهِ تَعَالَى, what is necessary in the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High. He mentions وَمَا يَسْتَحِيلُ وَمَا يَجُوزُ. So يَجِبُ, what is necessary, مَا يَسْتَحِيلُ, what is impossible, وَمَا يَجُوزُ, and what is permissible. Because a rational ruling, hukam, is divided into these three categories. Either something is necessary, or it is permissible, or it is impossible. And with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is necessary upon every mukallaf to know what is permissible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, otherwise the person will fall into making errors and making mistakes in Tawheed, monotheism. And to know what is essential to affirm for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that which is impossible. And we will go on to each one of these categories. The word for necessary is wujub. The word for impossible is mustahil. And the word for permissible is jawaz. These are three words and their derivatives which are mentioned in the Arabic text. So it is necessary for us to know what is necessary for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he starts by saying, فَيَجِبُ فِي حَقِّهِ تَعَالَى الْوُجُودُ وَضِدُّهُ الْعَدَمُ وَالدَّلِيلُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ وُجُودُ هَذِهِ الْمَخْلُوقَاتِ, which means it is necessary in the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attribute of existence, wujud. Its opposite is adam, non-existence. The proof established for it is the very existence of creation, وُجُودُ هَذِهِ الْمَخْلُوقَاتِ, meaning this is one evidence for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of many evidences. Here the attribute wujud is the most contested attribute by the modern atheist. In fact, the atheist existed in the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Al-Quran al-Kareem, the divine speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, refuted the atheist in many verses. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought rational arguments against the atheist. which the atheist in the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was unable to break, naqd, unravel those arguments. The atheist was unable to do so. And throughout the ages, the atheist has brought out arguments for the non-existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the ulama of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah have brought out the counter-arguments and broke the back of the arguments. So this attribute, al-wujud, is the main attribute contested by atheists, and what they forward in today's day and age to counter the attribute of wujud, the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a theory which they have formulated in the 1800s known as the theory of evolution. And what this theory proposes is that everything is by chance. The globe is by chance, that the earth is globe shaped. The sun and the moon are by chance. The stars are by chance. And what it forwards, simply put, is that humanity originated from a pool of mud. This pool of mud was lying for millions and millions and millions of years. Lightning struck the pool and different elements came about, not explaining how those elements came about in the first place, but those elements evolved into a cell. That cell then, after millions and millions and millions of years, developed into two cells. Then after millions and millions of years, those two cells became a creature. And then after millions and millions and millions of years, those creatures became two creatures maybe. And then after millions and millions and millions of years, that creature developed until it became a fish. Then that fish one day, after millions and millions and millions of years, decided to try out the land, to get out of the pool of mud, and attempted to get onto the land. So the first fish that attempted came out of the pool and landed on the ground and died. Then the second one tried. And they attempted this for millions and millions and millions of years until the first one was able to do so, but it was not able to walk on the land, and it wriggled itself somehow, and then it died also. Then after millions and millions and millions of years, that fish developed legs. After trying for millions of times, jumping onto the land, then that fish developed legs. Then after millions and millions and millions of years, that fish that developed legs now shed its scales and started to develop fur, and some of them started to develop hair, some of them started to develop skin, some of them started to develop, some of them kept the scale and were known as what? As reptiles. So after millions and millions and millions of years, all these creatures became different, distinct creatures. And after millions and millions and millions of years, those creatures developed legs. Then they developed backbones. After this, after millions and millions and millions of years, those creatures lost one leg, the four legs were lost, and then it developed two legs. Then after millions and millions and millions of years, the creature decided to stand upright. But before it stood upright, prior to these millions and millions of years, it developed hands by which it was able to swing off trees, developed thumbs, and then this theory forwarded is known as the theory of evolution. And they add scientific jargon and propose this as fact today. And then Richard Dawkins, who wrote his book known as The God Delusion, for the main part, when he condemns religion, he mainly condemns Christianity. And he mentions that religion does not promote the use of the rational faculty. And to propose this, he uses arguments from the Christian religion. But when it comes to Islam, the main arguments consist of the political situation of the Muslim world. Today the Muslim world is going through political turmoil, and political events are cited by Richard Dawkins to show that religion is extreme, and therefore, because there are some religious zealots and extremists, therefore God does not exist. This is the main argument against Islam. That because there are some religious zealots and extremists, God does not exist.
because of what some man does in Waziristan, or what some man does in Iran, or what some man does living in a cave in Central Asia. Therefore, Richard Dawkins has deduced that the Creator, the Divine Creator, does not exist because that man is extreme. This is the main argument. Then you have the likes of Stephen Hawking, who tried countering wujud of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First he wrote a book known as A Brief History of Time. This was a classic. It sold millions and millions of copies, just as much as years it took for evolution theory to develop. Millions and millions of copies. After this book, recently Stephen Hawking wrote a book in which he openly denies the Divine Creator and forwards the theory that the universe is self-subsistent, meaning it exists in itself and it reformulates itself. Every billions and billions of years, it will reformulate itself. So he denies that the universe has a beginning point, because once you admit that the universe has a beginning point, you must admit that there was a first cause, and that cause is divine. The main argument of the atheist against theists is based upon the fact that their very concept of the Divine Creator is a fallacy. Many people, when you discuss the existence of the Divine Creator with them, they will have a concept of an old man with a white beard sitting on a throne. This concept is false. If they deny this type of Creator, then we also deny this type of Creator. The Creator that we affirm is transcendent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond any likeness to creation. So as we go along the epistle, you will realize the false concepts which atheists refute are in reality false concepts of the Divine Creator. A second point to note is the use of the word God. Many times they use the word God. This word God frightens the atheist. Therefore, in your discourse, if you change the use of the word God to the divine planner or the divine creator, the very reaction is different. If you say to an atheist, you believe in God, he has already inoculated himself. His immune system will have defenses up, ready to protect him from this word God. But if you mention the word designer, the divine planner, he cannot refute those words, because those words are very general. And as we look and observe the creation around us, we observe the divine plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Al-Imam Ja'far As-Sadiq radiyallahu anhu, one of the great scholars of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, and one of the grandsons of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, from the lineage of Imam Al-Hussein radiyallahu anhu, when he was asked by an atheist regarding the divine existence, this attribute, wujud, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said to him, have you ever been out in sea and drowned? The man said, yes. He said, when your boat began to sink, what did you rely on? He said, I relied on the planks of the boat. So I grasped onto the planks. He said, then what did you rely on? He said that the wind blew me to the shore. He said, what did you do when the planks disappeared? He said, when I began to drown, he affirmed the divine existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because he knew someone will take him to the shore. This is innate in every human being. This is why if you ask anyone born on any part of the globe, east or west, north or south, regarding the divine creator and the divine planner, every child will have a word in his language which he will affirm for the divine creator. This is the attribute of wujud. And different scholars gave different evidences. For instance, the student of Imam Ja'far As-Sadiq, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa radiyallahu anhuma, regarding him, it is mentioned that a group of atheists came carrying swords. So in those days, in the period of Bani Abbas, the extremists were the atheists. And even today the extremists are atheists. The history of communism, read the history of communism, of socialism based on the principles of Darwin. Read the history of these groups, you will find fanatic atheists existing amongst them. Even today, in so-called religious wars, you have the Zionist state of Israel, which denies the Creator, but yet believes the Bible gives it the right for the state of Israel. So they deny the Creator, but they believe the Bible has given them the divine right to Israel. So in the time of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, a group of atheists came into the masjid with swords, and they threatened him with the swords. The number is mentioned in some accounts as being 15. And they said to him, we are going to place you to the sword. Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala replied to them, before you carry out your action of oppression, what do you say regarding a boat, a huge boat in the middle of the sea, which has goods stored on it, it has goods stored, and there are no people on this boat, yet the boat is steering in the right direction and going towards the shore in the right direction without anyone steering the boat. They said this is an absurd claim and illogical. Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala said, then the claim that the universe around us and everything that happens in it happening without a divine power is also ridiculous and illogical. After hearing this argument of the Imam, all of those atheists repented from ever claiming that there is no divine existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, when Al-Imam Malik bin Anas radiyallahu anhu, the contemporary of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala radiyallahu anhu, remember the usage of radiyallahu anhu is not impermissible for great Imams. Some scholars, some people claim that it is impermissible. It is not impermissible. They use radiyallahu anhu to differentiate the companions from the scholars, but it is permissible also in the right of the scholars to use the word radiyallahu anhu. Al-Imam Malik bin Anas was asked regarding the divine evidences, the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, the different tongues that we find amongst humanity, because by the way, the theory of evolution would theorize that this creature that developed into two branches, one was apes and chimpanzees and monkeys and all these different groups and species, and one developed into the Homo sapien, and then prior to the Homo sapien, different groups which they have theorized. After this human being was developed, they do not know how to explain language. They theorize that language developed from grunts. Initially people grunted at one another. Then after a while language is developed. But Al-Imam Malik bin Anas rahimahullah ta'ala states that the different languages we find amongst people, and the fact that humanity likes listening to tunes, nagham, angham, different tunes, is a divine sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another example given by Al-Imam Muhammad bin Idris al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, was born in the year 150, the same year Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala passed away. And the student of Al-Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani, the student of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah jami'an, they asked him regarding the divine evidences of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gave a simple example. He said, you find the berry, different creatures eat the berry and a different result happens. For instance, if the bee takes its pollen and eats from the berry, the bee will vomit out the contents of its bowels and it will bring out honey, asal. Other creatures, when they eat the berry, different things come out. One thing is being consumed, different things are coming out. For instance, you have fruit, one water, yet all the fruit is different. One earth, one fruit, one water, and everything is different. All the colors of the fruits are different, their smells are different, their tastes are different. Who is the one choosing this? The atheist will say nature, but the Muslim theist will say in reply, what you have affirmed for nature is intelligence, divine intelligence for nature. We affirm this for the divine creator, the divine planner. We believe in the divine planner, the divine creator, and we affirm that attribute of ilm, divine knowledge, for the divine creator. But the atheist will apply the same thing for nature by saying nature is the one that is carrying out everything around us. So the Muslim will say in reply that qudra, divine power, and knowledge, divine knowledge, is an attribute for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has designed and started this universe. This is what is meant by Al-Imam Ibrahim al-Bajuri when he states وَالدَّلِيلُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ وُجُودُ هَذِهِ الْمَخْلُوقَاتِ. The very evidence for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the very existence of creation. The Bedouin was asked, how do you believe in the divine creator? And the Bedouin replied that the footprints lead to the camel and the dung points out to the camel. In the same way we see around us the mountains and everything, the constellations around us, this points out to the divine creator. Very simple logic and very true. But do not be fooled by sophistication of absurdities. How does sophistication of absurdities happen? Imagine a young Pakistani of immigrant parents, born in London city, growing up in an English-speaking society, in the times where we have the fitna, the tribulation, which falls under the category of the tribulation of Dajjal, the great deceiver. This youngster grows up with an insecurity of being Pakistani. This insecurity develops into being insecure about being Muslim. When he goes to the masjid, he sees the teacher sitting with a stick and speaking Punjabi or Urdu, and in very rare cases Mirpuri. And when he goes to his university, he sees the professor with a tweed suit on, or a pinstripe suit, speaking in English, refined manners, well spoken. The books are published in nice format, unlike the qaida that he was using in the masjid, where the qaida was published in Pakistan on cheap paper. And the insecurity develops. He shares a coffee with middle class English people or middle class Asian people who speak with an accent better than mine, not a Brahmi accent. And then he enjoys the company of these people. It is appealing to the ego. But that person will not be able to rationalize. Yet the desire will overwhelm such a person, and the desire will lead him to try rationalizing atheism over Islam. And after a while, he will cut himself away from his family and become an open atheist. To this day, we have many people leaving Islam. At the same time, we have people entering Islam. But a category of those people become atheist because of those issues which surround them. But the arguments behind atheism need to be unraveled in this day and age by a person who has studied scholastic Islam and has studied astrophysics or has studied biology on an advanced level and is able to counter those arguments. This is an obligation on Muslims living in this country, that the Muslims as a whole must develop scholars who are able to study the sciences but have also studied Islam in the traditional fashion. Not like Aligarh University, where they water down the Islamic studies and study Western education to a high standard. No, you have Islamic studies to a high standard, and at the same time you study the arguments of the opponent in order to counter their arguments. This is something which the likes of Imam Sa'aduddin al-Taftazani rahimahullah ta'ala did in his work Sharh al-Aqaid. And in every age, if you look at the earlier scholars like Imam Abu Hamid Muhammad bin Muhammad al-Ghazali, a prime example, but many others, in each time and age, they countered the arguments of the atheists. So this attribute of wujud is the first attribute for the divine existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The author continues. He states, وَيَجِبُ فِي حَقِّهِ تَعَالَى الْقِدَمُ وَمَعْنَاهُ أَنَّهُ تَعَالَى لَا أَوَّلَ لَهُ وَضِدُّهُ الْحُدُوثُ وَالدَّلِيلُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ أَنَّهُ لَوْ كَانَ حَادِثًا لَاحْتَاجَ إِلَى مُحْدِثٍ وَهُوَ مُحَالٌ. This attribute, infinite pre-existence, it is necessary for us to affirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala la awwala lahu. There is no beginning point for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if he had a beginning, then that would mean he has a cause. Because everything with a beginning has a cause. If someone rolls a ball, there is someone who started the rolling of the ball. The rolling of the ball has a beginning point. Everything in the universe has a beginning point. We state the beginning of the universe was caused by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The shaitan, Satan, whispers to a person in his prayer, stating, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything, then who created Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This question is illogical. It is a logical fallacy. Shaitan was fooled, or shaitan is a fool. Why? Initially when he refused to bow down to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he thought he is better than Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, because he was made from fire. Shaitan is made from fire, smokeless fire. And Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam is made from clay. If you take fire, fire ascends. If you take clay, clay will fall. So Shaitan used this philosophy. He was the first philosopher. He developed this philosophy and he rebelled against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if Shaitan was granted guidance, he would have thought that fire, wherever it is placed, it destroys things. Mud, if you place a seed in mud, plantations come out. Vegetation comes out. This is how mud is better than fire. So Shaitan in the same way whispers to a Muslim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he created everything, who created Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How is this illogical? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a divine creator, then that creator must also have a creator. Then that creator must also have a creator. Then that creator must also have a creator. And this will continue, and this is known as tasalsul, regression. And regression is illogical. The person must stop at one point, that the very first cause is the divine creator. And that divine creator does not have a beginning. Because once we affirm a beginning for him, then he has the traits of the creation. A second point is that the author mentions the word huduth, which is translated as contingency. What does this word mean? This word means al-wujud ba'd al-adam, existence after non-existence. Anything that has existence after non-existence is described as huduth. We had a beginning, therefore we are hadith. Al-wujud ba'd al-adam. And any traits which the hadith creation has is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if someone says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a beginning, then they must affirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has all the other traits of created beings, which is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the other traits consist of going out of existence, or changing, going under change. Changing is impossible for the divine creator. So the author states, there is no origin for him. يجب في حقه تعالى القدم it is necessary in his right the Most High al-Qidam, divine pre-existence. وَمَعْنَاهُ أَنَّهُ تَعَالَى لَا أَوَّلَ لَهُ. The meaning of it is that for him the Most High there is no beginning point. وَضِدُّهُ الْحُدُوث. The opposite to this is huduth, existence after non-existence. This is why propose this question to the atheist. Either we created ourselves or we were made from nothing. Is there a third option? The first option is we created ourselves. We designed ourselves. If this is possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if this is possible for us to create ourselves, then we ourselves would have created ourselves how we wanted to be created. We would not have been created short if we're short. We would have made ourselves tall so we can intimidate others. And we would have made the nose in a certain way. Different aspects of every human being are different. Therefore we would have made our qualities how we want them to be. Some people would have made their muscles big. People spend hours in the gym. If they created themselves, they would be able to create themselves how they want it to be. So this is illogical. The second option. They came from nothing. They came from nothing. This is also impossible. If you saw a seed on a rock in the middle of a desert and someone says to you, where did this seed come from? If someone says it came from the rock, this is impossible. Habit shows us that seeds do not come out of rocks. If someone says it came from the sky, seeds do not come from the sky. In the same way, nothing comes from nothing. Existence has a beginning point, and that beginning point was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the third option, that everything has a beginning and was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he states, وَالدَّلِيلُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. The evidence for that, the proof established for it, is that if he was contingent, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had this trait of having a beginning, he would be dependent upon an entity to make him contingent. Something else would have brought him into existence. And this is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because if we say he subhanahu wa ta'ala came into existence because someone brought him into existence, then that would mean the one who brought him into existence would also have a beginning. And so on and so forth. This is known as tasalsul, regression, and it is circular logic, a dawr. In Arabic this is termed as a dawr, circular logic, which makes no sense. This is impossible. So the first attribute is al-wujud, the second attribute is al-qidam. The third attribute is al-baqa. The author states, وَيَجِبُ فِي حَقِّهِ تَعَالَى الْبَقَاءُ وَمَعْنَاهُ أَنَّهُ تَعَالَى لَا آخِرَ لَهُ وَضِدُّهُ الْفَنَاءُ وَالدَّلِيلُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ أَنَّهُ لَوْ كَانَ فَانِيًا لَكَانَ حَادِثًا وَهُوَ مُحَالٌ. It is necessary in the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فِي حَقِّهِ تَعَالَى, that there is no end for him. Baqa is eternal, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall remain. Its opposite is fana. Fana is being destroyed or coming to an end, cessation. This is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall come to an end, then that means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have a beginning. And if he has a beginning, then that would mean he has a first cause. And if he has a first cause, then he has a creator. And then we would go back to the earlier argument, which is impossible. This is why when Ad-Dajjal, Al-Masih Ad-Dajjal, the false Messiah appears, people would be ignorant of Tawheed. And when they see Ad-Dajjal, they should know that Ad-Dajjal as a beginning, he was created. He is contained by the 6 directions. And he will walk with the right eye blind, and the left eye would be disfigured. It is described as green. The left eye would be green, disfigured. So he would be a'war, which is deformed in both eyes. This man who is unable to fix the eyes, his own eyes, how can he be the divine creator? This creature that relies on organs, how can he be the divine creator? So when he appears, people will worship him. They will only worship him because they will be ignorant of Tawheed.